It's time to have your say. Welcome to the Q&A. It's time for episode 79 of Ask SCW, answering your questions in the wrestling community. So welcome to SCW here on YouTube.com. Thank you for choosing the channel and choosing the video. If you want to be involved on the next video with your question and receive a shout out, then you can drop a comment here on YouTube, leave the hashtag AskSCW, or you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. But without further ado, there's WWE, NXT, AEW, and much, much more. Let's get in with our first question this week. And it comes from the Ego Maniac, Derek Stark, and he asks, what do you think of Chris Jericho appearing on the Broken Skull sessions with Stone Cold Steve Austin? Do you think this could be a sign of things to come, of working between different companies together? Great question to kick things off this week here on Ask SCW, and yeah, I mean, was it April Fool's Day? It felt like it, didn't it? But no, it's genuinely happening. Chris Jericho from AEW is going to be on the WWE Network straight after Night 2 of WrestleMania on the Broken Skull sessions with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And yeah, it's created shockwaves throughout the entire wrestling community. Even reports have come out on this that when the idea was first put together, Steve Austin actually had to text Vince McMahon twice to get the A-OK. So the communication sometimes isn't fully there, so he wanted to double check that this was actually a good go-ahead. But Vince was fine with it, and I think it's been clear to see that with Vince McMahon and WWE first off, that if there's business that can be done and it's good for business, Vince is always okay with it, despite the fact you've seen from previous, generations of wrestlers that have had major fallouts with the company, for example, like Bret the Hitman Hart, Ultimate Warrior. They always end up coming back, and Chris Jericho, he's never had bad feeling with the company. He's just working for a company that's seen as now the major rival. But how much of a major rival are they really to WWE? Does Vince McMahon really see them anywhere near the level that WWE are? I mean, WWE on these big platforms like Fox and USA each week just got a multi, what was it, $1 billion deal with Peacock for the American WWE network. So money wise, WWE are rolling in it, and they are head and shoulders the #1 company. There still effectively is no competition. It would be a long time before AEW does that. And I mean, Chris Jericho has a good working relationship with so many people within WWE. So from that side of things, it really, it's smart business. And from AEW's standpoint, Tony Khan has openly said he's willing to do business with WWE. He's willing to have that open forbidden door, if you want, for WWE, as well as the others that we've had with Impact, New Japan, NWA. There could be anything is possible in the realms of professional wrestling. Tony Khan and AEW want the best product for the fans, so that's what their side of things. So they're very open to this idea, and it can only do them wonders. Chris Jericho, an AEW talent on the WWE Network on the biggest WWE weekend of the year. Well, hello, that's going to put some eyes on the product for them. So that's fantastic on their side of things. But as for working together, I still find it hard to believe that we'll actually get an actual show with the two companies. Who would go over? I think egos would take over on that, and which company would be the one. Because I mean, if you look at the Twitterverse, for example, the sides that people are on with WWE and AEW, I don't think their heads could quite deal with the idea if their side was to lose in that. So, as well as the companies themselves. So for me, I find it hard on that perspective. But what will actually happen on this Broken Skull sessions, I think, is the big question really. And I think AEW and New Japan will be touched upon. I think it would be weird if it wasn't. But I think mainly it will be based on Jericho's career in WWE. When it comes to New Japan and, of course, more importantly, AEW, I think it will be quite brief, I think it will be civil, and I think it will be inoffensive. I don't think it's going to be this, we're looking to take down WWE. I think it's going to be something that's going to be briefly touched upon, perhaps a minute or two of this podcast. Probably enough that's, where we can get these videos trending all over Twitter and stuff like that of what was actually said, but I don't think we're going to get actually much of it. I think it's just going to be a great platform and a great business decision overall. I don't actually believe that we're going to get Jericho saying that they're looking to take out WWE or AEW going to be on the same level or anything like that. I think it's going to be just healthy competition, maybe a healthy plug here and there, and saying that this is good for the business, and it breeds perhaps it breeds competition. Maybe it helps other people bring their A game to the product, and maybe it's good to try and see a company rising up from nothing and seeing how far they can get. Maybe it's something along that of where we'll get. But as for it, I'm really excited for it. I think it's can't miss. I think it's actually quite exciting compared to the big wrestling week that we've got with TakeOver, with 2 nights of that, 2 nights of WrestleMania. We've got this as well. It's going to be such an action-packed week, and honestly, I can't wait for it. Next question coming from a Garfield Man. I love that username. What are your thoughts on this year's WrestleMania card? Is it weak, medium, or strong? I think it's quite a good card. If you look at the card itself, I think there are a lot of great matches and a lot of great potential. The one thing I would say is that I think the build has been quite weak. I mean, they haven't really made us feel that a lot of these matches are WrestleMania worthy, if you want. But if you look at the talent pool that are involved with some of these matches, or particularly with all of these matches, I would turn around and say that we have potential to have a very good WrestleMania here. And with the card that's put together, I wouldn't be surprised if coming out of WrestleMania that we turn around and say, wow, this was like another WrestleMania 31 where the build wasn't so much going into it, but coming out of it, this is one of the best WrestleManias of that decade. I have like a quite high expectation for this, especially with it being the 2 nights, because not everything's going to be in one lump, so it's not going to feel too heavy. It's nice to have that Saturday and Sunday. I really hope WWE does continue that going forward. Not that I personally see it happening, but I would like them to do that. Looking at it, I think honestly, overall, I think that if we get to the end of WrestleMania, I think it's going to be medium to strong looking at it, because I think we're going to look back at it and say there were some great matches there. Hopefully the booking decisions, of course, can impact a lot of that as well. So hopefully we'll get some good, clear, decisive, and logical, I suppose, finishes to these matches. But I think when you look at the work ethic of the workers that we have in the ring, I think that we have good stuff that come from them. So if they're given time, they're given all the things that they need to put on a good show, I expect good things from this WrestleMania. But as for the build has been quite lackluster, to say the very least. It's been all very rushed. I'd say that if you look at it as well, Fastlane got in the way. A lot of matches didn't seem to even be in place until around Elimination Chamber Fastlane time. So a lot of these matches have come together what feels with a month's build, and I think that does harm the product a little bit of when you're going into WrestleMania. You want matches decided by the Rumble even before, to be brutally honest, because in the old days, I mean, I did a review of WrestleMania 9, which is available on the channel right now. A lot of those matches, some of the storylines were building for that WrestleMania from December time, and if you look at that WrestleMania, it wasn't necessarily the best WrestleMania really to judge in comparison, but the build to that WrestleMania with storylines, things were gelling nicely together, and they had week by week some developments that were going forward. It helped you get excited for what those shows would be. So I want to see more of that. I want to see more decisive booking going forward in future years from WWE, not this last minute booking on the fly. It's so much more better when you have storylines that are planned well in advance. But of course, plans do change. Sometimes injuries get into place and stuff like that. There are things that make things change, but as long as you've got the plan B, plan C in there, and you can tie things still together, you still can make a really good show, and most of the card would then have time to develop. But overall, no, I'm pretty hyped for Mania this week. I think it's going to be pretty decent. Over Manise from the Hard Hitting Wrestling Show with a hard hitting question as always. Which match on WrestleMania are you looking forward to seeing? One top match. Well, if I had to pick one top match, because there would be more matches I'll be discussing in future questions, I have to go with the Triple Threat match, the main event of Night 2 of WrestleMania, Roman Reigns against Daniel Bryan against Edge. If you look at things, the storyline with Roman and Edge didn't go how I necessarily wanted it to go. I mean, I wanted Edge to have that feel-good comeback story, Roman Reigns to really sort of be that horrible, heel that we've seen, head of the table, that he's going to take away Edge's moments and probably put him back on the shelf and stuff like that. We didn't really get any of that. Edge as well, 10 years to the day when he had to relinquish the World Heavyweight Championship. The idea of trying to bring back the big gold belt, I think, would have been a fun storyline as well. Not really seeing any of that sort of stuff materialise, but since Daniel Bryan's come into the mix, it did feel at first that I was not going to be such a fan of the idea of the storyline because of the fact it was taken away from those other two. Now it's been turned into a triple threat. You can look at all the layers of the way that the storyline's been thrown together, and I do think it's pretty awesome. And I must admit, the last few weeks on SmackDown, I really enjoyed watching each step of the story as we've got towards the triple threat, especially as it's felt like that's been the clear direction for a little while. So this is the match I'm most looking forward to. I think it will steal the show. I think that if you look at things as well, the idea at some point that we thought with these wrestlers that they wouldn't compete again. Of course, Daniel Bryan and Edge both having to retire previously, now being in a WrestleMania main event together. Roman Reigns as well, of course, having to leave obviously with leukemia before, but able to come back. All of these guys are now in a WrestleMania main event, and all of them are putting on great stuff stuff as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I think it's going to be, it's something really to behold. It's something to really look forward to. So this is the match that I would choose and say right now I'm most looking forward to seeing. Wrestling by Waldridge is next for us now. A simple question: which match from both nights do you think will be the best? Quite a lot of good ones there. You certainly are right there. There's a lot of good matches. As I said in the last question, the match I'm most looking forward to is that triple threat match on night 2. But there are other matches on night 2 that you can turn around and say they're going to be awesome as well. Asuka versus Rhea Ripley. Despite the lack of build, let's be honest with ourselves, that's going to be an awesome match. It's a dream match to say the very, very least. And as well, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn is on night 2 as well. I know Logan Paul will sort of be in and around the mix with that. But I mean, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn to have a WrestleMania match with everything they've been through previously, that's going to be awesome to see. And night 1, there's some great matches to look forward to as well. The one I'm looking forward to the most is Cesaro and Seth Rollins. This has got to be Cesaro's moment. The storyline is building towards it so nicely. Wasted potential. If Cesaro doesn't get a win here, then what are we doing with Cesaro? We have to. I think it's almost the point. This is make or break for him. If there's ever a match in Seth Rollins' career where he doesn't need the win, this is that match, because it won't harm him in any way whatsoever. It's only for Cesaro's benefit. So that for me is a match. As a storyline, I'm kind of enjoying, and as a match I think will be really good as well. So that's the match I'm most looking forward to in night 1. But of course you've got Banks and Belair, which will be a great match in ring as well. And of course, Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre, which from my belief is going to kick off WrestleMania night 1, which is, how big is that going to be? Such an awesome moment that you turn around and say that the first match in front of fans in over a year, and those two superstars are going to get that opportunity. That's almost like a WrestleMania main event in itself. That's going to feel very, very special, and I think that that's a clever booking decision in my opinion from WWE. So to answer your question, night 1 has to be Cesaro, Seth Rollins, and night 2, Roman Reigns, Edge, and Daniel Bryan. Ryan Crago of our next question now. Which match has the most pressure to deliver at either TakeOver or Mania? Thank you so much. Well, no, thank you so much for your question. I'm really, really grateful for your question. And to look at TakeOver and WrestleMania, as I said, we'll just finish on for WrestleMania. It is that triple threat once again that's got the most pressure on it, because the storyline, the Royal Rumble win from Edge, how it's been transformed into a triple threat match. Some people are very anti the idea of Daniel Bryan being in the match, so that match has the most pressure to deliver, I feel, at WrestleMania, because when you look at it, I think fans will be quite heavily critical with that. But I suppose you could argue that all the main event matches have that pressure on them. And of course, Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley, that definitely has a lot of it on there. Lashley not long holding the championship. Drew McIntyre as well. People probably feel he's had his time, doesn't need that moment in front of fans this year. He's carried that championship for so long. Banks and Belair, which will probably be a main event as well, will have a lot of pressure on it. So I think a lot of the matches do, but I'm going to go for that triple threat just purely because of the Royal Rumble win and Daniel Bryan's inclusion. I think a lot of people have been a little bit anti that, but for me, now I've seen how the story's unraveled, I've quite enjoyed it. But as for TakeOver, which one of them? I think you look at the main event matches, I think of both nights, I think those are the ones that, again, that's where the pressure is, because you send the fans home happy. If it's how you leave them. If you have a great way that a show finishes, I suppose the way that a show starts is just as equally important as well. Those are the things that can really leave a fan wanting more at the end of the show and getting people in the right mood very early in the card. So those are the matches that always have the most pressure. But to pick one out, I'll do it from each night. I will go with Raquel Gonzalez and Io Shirai because that's the main event of night 1. I'm assuming it's Raquel Gonzalez's crowning moment. So it's all out to make this the biggest match possible, to make Raquel Gonzalez look like the biggest star possible, and I think the same for Karrion Kross on night 2. Arguably Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Cole as well have that pressure, but I feel that with that pressure, they've had so much matches previously in other promotions and stuff, the history's there for them too. I think it's natural them to will put on an amazing match, so I think there is slightly more pressure on Finn Balor and Karrion Kross, because this is a match that's been building since Karrion Kross dropped the championship and Finn Balor won the championship in September last year. So this one's been building for a good 6 months. So for that does have pressure as well. Next question comes from Separate of Slam Hub Wrestling with a great question here. WWE should bring back brand exclusive pay-per-views. In a way, they can have some legitimacy to their weekly shows with booking some important matches that would be forgotten on a random pay-per-view. That's a really good question. You make some really good points there for that one as well. And of course, doing that structure would improve ratings as well, because if you have meaningful storylines and matches on Raw and SmackDown every single week, that will eventually bring more eyes to the weekly product rather than just saving those big matches for pay-per-view. So you make some fantastic points there in with your question. My only feeling looking at it though is that although I really enjoy single branded pay-per-views, I feel WWE have always come back to doing those dual branded ones, having all the biggest stars under one roof on one night. Now, of course, it is usually more special when it's saved for the big 4 pay-per-views of the year, but at the same time, I guess that really hits the panic button. Maybe they just feel it sells more tickets, more people are invested if all the biggest stars are under one roof on the same night. But in my opinion, for pay-per-views, rather than single branded ones, I'd just mix it up still like we usually do, but not have every superstar on every pay-per-view that usually is there. Why does Seth Rollins need to be on every pay-per-view? Take the ones that are already in the storyline, which is one is now feels like it's at the point it's needed for pay-per-view, rather than saying let's throw this on for a match here, give a DQ finish or some screwy finish to need to carry it over to the next pay-per-view. Just use the ones that are ready. And as well, looking at those lower card talents, they'll have the opportunity to get on pay-per-view, and those big moments that can help them get to the next level will be helped for them, because if they're so far at the moment, they're stuck on weekly TV, and of course for them to have single branded pay-per-views will give them the opportunity to get onto pay-per-views. So you could still do that, but just give them those big moments and not have every superstar like you usually do, but also have the ability to mix it up so you don't have the same names on every show. Everything feels fresh, feels special as it's going on. That's personally how I would book it, but looking at what you've said there, I think you make some excellent points, and particularly when you look at towards weekly TV, I think the ratings would definitely get a boost if Raw and SmackDown felt more important with the booking and the matches that they were creating, because that right now is something that is missing. The storylines in general need improvement, but when you look at things, I mean, yeah, if you know that the big matches are all going to be a pay-per-view, you don't need to stick around for Monday Night Raw or SmackDown. So, no, I think you make some good points there. It certainly needs addressing. WWE needs to look at their pay-per-view calendar and how it should be structured going forward. DWE with our next question now here on Ask SCW. Do you think Peacock is going to ruin Raw as soon as Vince leaves the company? Will be owned by NBC, and they haven't had the best start based on last week's Raw. Well, to my knowledge, I think that Peacock only has the rights for the WWE Network. I don't think they have rights for the company themselves, but they certainly are making a lot of impact on what you see on the WWE Network from an American point of view. There's a lot of things that are being edited out of shows, just generally things that WWE did 20, 30 years ago that people would find generally offensive, and some of it rightly so when you look back at some of the stuff that WWE has done in the past. But looking at it with last week's Raw, it was an atrocity. Let's not kid ourselves. This was one of the worst Raws in a very, very long time. And is that due to some of the things that they don't want to offend Peacock with some of the content they're putting out? There could be a slight argument towards that, but what I would turn around and say is that I do think that there are other Raws in recent memory that have been really bad that were before the Peacock era. If I go back to Legends Night this year, for me I feel that is on par as a really, really bad Raw as well. WWE have a problem with booking Monday Night Raw, and I don't know what it is, because even if they put a lot of the big stars over there, I think it's just too many hours to fill. They can't find a way to keep people invested from hour 1 to hour 3. They can do it some weeks. I mean, if you look back when Bobby Lashley won the WWE Championship, that was a good narrative story that went on from the start of the show all the way through to the finish. But what they can't seem to do is find a way to do that on a consistent basis. Raw, that was the catalyst of what made Raw what it was. You know, finding a way to have, you know, story narratives going throughout the night, a reason to need to keep tuning in. In more recent times, and even the last couple of years, I'd say that a lot of things, yes, there's progressions to storylines, but it's like segment by segment. It's almost as if you just need to watch Raw in like 12, 15 minute segments, but there's nothing that really has a continuation to say, I need to keep going on. If, for example, if you're only interested in about 3 storylines currently on Raw, and they're all in the first hour and a half, switch the show off. You don't need to watch the rest, because if you're not interested in the other stuff that's going on the show, especially with other apps like YouTube where you can see like a couple of minute clips here and there, you don't need to see what's going on the rest. So ratings wise, it's not, you know, there's that sort of reason. But I think from storytelling point of view, which I think is more of the basis of your question, yeah, it was awful this week, but WWE they go through up and down spells all the time, it feels recent with this, and I'm hoping, I really am hoping, because Raw before last week was actually improving, but unfortunately this week it was kind of like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and that was really harmful when we're so close to WrestleMania as well. I really hope WWE can turn it around for this go home show edition of Raw going into WrestleMania, because you want to have that positive feeling, especially during WrestleMania season. But to answer your question as a long and a short of it, I do think it'll have some impact in places, but I don't think it's going to have so much. Raw has been very up and down in my personal opinion over the last 2 or 3 years. There are things that I can take from the shows that I enjoy, but I do find a lot of the storytelling is quite bizarre, and I think WWE does struggle under the 3 hours to make Raw and decent entertaining program, especially when they want to appeal to so many different audiences as well, that sometimes I think that other people disconnect from things that's going on. And I think as well that if they want to have that continuity with each of those storylines, trying to base and hit the targets of all these different audiences, I think sometimes they lose sight of what's going on. It's almost as if, like with Raw, NXT, SmackDown, 205 Live, even if they have different booking teams and things going on, there's so much content that you have to try and create different stuff for each and every week. It does become quantity over quality, and I think this is where WWE suffers, because they can't think of something fresh and exciting and new to give us. And I think from that point, that's when they sort of hit the panic button, try all these different random things like splitting up the Hurt Business and stuff like that. And I think that people turn around and say afterwards that they dislike it, and they think, oh, okay, we'll have to change this around again, and it just becomes a mess after a while. And I think that's currently the state of play that we're in, and WWE really does need to address that, whether that's Peacock's involvement or not. Jackknife Power Blog, what a cool username that is. With our next question now, how long of a feud should Adam Cole versus Kyle O'Reilly be? Is forever too long? No, seriously though, I mean, these guys have been in and around each other's careers since 2009, as a team, as a rivals. They've always been in and around each other, whether it's Ring of Honor, New Japan, now NXT, and we're finally getting the match that we've been looking forward to for a long time now in NXT. And I do think that this should be the first of at least a 3-match series, and I think honestly this should go through to the summer, perhaps even towards the end of the year. You've still got Roderick Strong, Bobby Fish, other people that can be in and around this rivalry when WWE feels like the need to bring it in. So for me, I'm hoping that what happens at this takeover, I think Kyle O'Reilly needs the big win, so I think it would be a good place for him to get that win. Adam Cole, even though it's an unsanctioned match and it doesn't count, I think Adam Cole still will be upset at the idea that he didn't win the match, and I think the story can unravel there. It certainly doesn't feel like a one and done for me, so for me, I'd say earliest this needs to go on through the summer. At latest, I mean, I'd be quite happy to see this go through the entire 2021, because these two have a lot of history and a great story they can tell, and the way it can be played around, it can involve championships, it can involve everything that needs to. This is a rivalry. For me, I get the Gargano Ciampa vibes from it, and I really think if it's booked right, I think it can be fire, I think it can be special, and I think it'd be not just rivalry, I think there's even a chance they can top it. Next questions now come from Lorenzo Carrillo, asking, has NXT lost its uniqueness since the USA Network move because of the pressure they had with AEW? How would you book a good NXT call-up? And will new NXT call-ups occur post WrestleMania, Raw or SmackDown? And looking forward to next week's content drop. Well, thank you for saying that you're looking forward to it. I'm really pleased to hear that. I hope everyone else is as well. Videos will be dropping daily next week. In fact, they have been dropping quite regularly this week. Of course, WrestleMania 9 review was dropped yesterday, the first retro WrestleMania review. We've got the Q&A today, aiming to do another retro WrestleMania review tomorrow. Of course, WrestleMania predictions on Tuesday, and then of course then we continue on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all the way through to WrestleMania with reviews for TakeOver, Stand and Deliver, and WrestleMania 37 as well. So lots of content will be on the way. So thank you for saying that, and also gives me the opportunity to plug it as well. But going into your questions then, first off, NXT and the USA Network with the pressure of AEW. Yeah, it's massively harmed NXT, because NXT went from 1 hour to 2 hours, which again, the same thing as Raw, oversaturating it. But it was great in some ways, because it's give superstars to get an opportunity on NXT that didn't quite get it before, but it's a lot more work that they have to put into their storylines. But I do think NXT has coped well with that over the time. I do think NXT overall, more than not, puts on a great show each and every week. The problem is that once it's gone to TV, it's become the third brand in WWE, and it's lost its identity. That is the problem with NXT, especially when we compare it then to AEW, because not only has it become the third brand, it was the alternative to Raw and SmackDown before there was an AEW. That's where the cool kids that wanted different from Raw and SmackDown went to, and when AEW came along, that was a completely different company altogether. That took away from NXT as well. So not only did it become the third brand, it totally lost its roots of what it represented, and those went to AEW. And I think that's why a lot of people, I don't say they've gone sour on NXT, but I think that's why a lot of people turned on the idea of NXT. Booking a good NXT call-up, now this is going to be interesting. I think the thing is, you need to have the foundation storylines in place. You need to look at a superstar that you're bringing to your show. If you're looking at NXT and going, this superstar is going to come to Raw or SmackDown, Rhea Ripley, your current one, is a prime example. What is her storyline narrative? What does she want to represent? What is her stance going to be going forward? Is she going to be a babyface, a heel? Where do you see her in 6 months to a year. And that stuff needs to be thought about before you bring her onto TV. If you bring her onto TV and think, right, okay, we're going to put her on TV, see how she connects for the first couple of weeks. If it takes off, we'll try and figure some plans. If it doesn't, we'll stick her in catering. That's not how you do things. That's what made some of these NXT call-ups seem like a failure, especially because a lot of the time they're main eventers as well in NXT, which probably plays a part in it also. If you look at the likes of Sami Zayn, for example, I think has been a good call-up, but at the same time, he was the main player in NXT. He was the face of NXT at one point. To come to then Raw, SmackDown, and just be, I don't want to say a bit part player, but a mid-carder at best, people will look at these superstars and see them as the future, and if they don't get to the top of the card, and sometimes we're perhaps a bit impatient and they don't get there quickly, we turn on them as well and see that it's not working how we want it to. So it does kind of go hand in hand. I think WWE, when they call them up, they need to have a plan for someone, and we need to be patient to see it work out. And I think that's the key there. And if you look at Rhea Ripley, for example, a good NXT call-up, to say right now, I would say, although it was rushed and it was last minute what they've done with Asuka, I feel they've gone the wrong angle of doing it. If you look at it, I'd say with Rhea Ripley, she was supposed to be at the Raymond James Stadium last year at WrestleMania. She had the opportunity taken away from her, which deflated the idea. She had the dream match with Charlotte, but she didn't get that big moment she thought she was going to get. She wasn't the better athlete on the night. She should have gone in and been the babyface, trying to get that moment to say, I'm not missing out on WrestleMania this year. There's an opportunity here. I'm making that challenge. I'm supposed to have that. Let me have it this year. That challenge could have been accepted. If you want to have Rhea Ripley as the heel, then she should have turned on Asuka this week and said, not only did I just want to have the opportunity to have that moment at the Raymond James Stadium, I'm not going to make the same mistake as last year. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to win that championship. And the way to do that, I'm taking you down, I'm taking you out, I'm taking no prisoners. That would have made so much more sense in 2 weeks of booking, and you'd have hyped that match up massively, probably more than some of the matches that have been built over the last few weeks, by the way, on WWE, and that match would have seemed monumental and can't miss. It's going to be awesome when it takes place, but the thing is though, you do start to worry what the long-term planning will be for an NXT call-up right like Rhea Ripley after WrestleMania, especially if she doesn't win the match. She's already called up, she's already got the championship match, and she's already lost. You do start to wonder how WWE's booking strategies will be, and I do worry because Keith Lee, it wasn't the best few months when he was first called up. I'd hate it to be the same with Rhea as well. As for NXT call-ups to Raw or SmackDown, I want to give a shout out as well to Micah Tenhab's Mike as well, asked the same question. Just to say, I mean, I think it depends on if people lose, understand and deliver. That's usually when you have to notice it, because there is usually some form of call-up. Bianca Belair was the one last year. She kind of debuted at WrestleMania and then was a part of the Raw brand the night after. So I wouldn't be surprised to see somebody come from NXT to Raw. It's just depending on who it's going to be. And I think the ones you have to look at most, Karrion Kross for me screams someone that would work on the main roster. If he doesn't beat Finn Balor, I don't see where he is on NXT going forward. I would say he would be the one that you would call up. And the same for Raquel Gonzalez. If she loses to Io Shirai, where does she go from there? In fact, even Io Shirai, if she was to lose the championship, could be coming up from that to the main roster. So I wouldn't be surprised. Those are the 3 people I would keep an eye out for if someone is going to come to Raw or SmackDown after WrestleMania. Let's get our other 2 questions then from Mike at Tannerhabs Mike. What surprises or swerves could we see on both nights of NXT TakeOver? And who do you see beating Volta for the NXT UK title? And will it happen when crowds return? Well, let's touch on Volta first, because clearly you and I think the same thing, that Volta is retaining that championship against Tommaso Ciampa. So let's go down here and say, what if Finn Balor loses the NXT championship? Maybe you could book Finn Balor against Volta at the first NXT UK takeover in front of a crowd when, you know, these crowds return. That certainly would be a match that I would love to see. I think there would be a lot of buzz to see it. Another name that I think will potentially could get there eventually, and I think certainly will get his victory over Volta in the end, is Ilya Dragunov, because he was the one with a major 5-star match, was being built, you know, like a mega star on NXT UK, lost that match, but honestly come up looking great in defeat. I do think one day he's going to get that win over Volta. Maybe, just maybe, it will be for the NXT UK Championship. I certainly would like to see that somewhere going down the line, because Triple H is meant to be a big fan of Dragunov, so certainly would be, if someone from that roster, I would go with him, but certainly as a money match as well, Volta versus Finn Balor, sign me up, that sounds amazing on paper. As for swerves on NXT TakeOver, Roderick Strong is one I would turn and say that could be a swerve there, because, I mean, Roddy went home last week and he's still hurt with the breakup of the UE. I wouldn't be surprised if he, or if Bobby Fish was to return and they were to get involved in some format of the unsanctioned match. I just hope that we don't get that here, because I just feel it's not needed on TakeOver. That sort of thing can happen on weekly TV in and amongst storyline, but maybe Kyle O'Reilly is going to get that big win, that big moment, and maybe Roderick Strong just can't take the idea of the UE not being together, that he can't take not being working alongside Adam Cole, and he actually helps Adam Cole pick up the victory at TakeOver, and at that point him and Roderick Strong still remain a duo and a partnership going forward. Adam Cole, if you want, will take him back, and it's just Kyle O'Reilly that goes off as the single star. So that could be a swerve that could go down, but as I said before previously in my predictions video, which if you haven't seen, go and check out the rest of them as well, I think Kyle O'Reilly needs the big win here, and I think either way that storyline does continue, but I do feel that that certainly would be one fun swerve you could see. One other one, just because Volta has been mentioned already, Volta and Tommaso Ciampa. I mean, Timothy Thatcher has been missing, hasn't he, for a little while, and of course there's been talk of potentially him as part of Imperium. Killian Dane as well, Alexander Wolf wanted him back after, you know, almost like a sanity reunion. Wouldn't be surprised. That'd be a fun little shock and swerve if either of them were to turn up and help Volta win at TakeOver. So let's wait and see. I think if there are any couple of swerves, those would be your ones. Jamie, the controversial one, homes with our next question now. And it's a two-part question for us now. Seeing as QT Marshall has turned heel and formed a new group with some of the Nightmare Family trainees, do you think AEW has too many groups now? And if you were to break one group up, which would it be and why? AEW has a lot of groups. I will just say very quickly, I really enjoyed that segment with QT Marshall turning heel this week. Of course, it's been in the works for a while, but I love the way that it was executed, how members of the Nightmare Family, those trainees, turned on the Rhodes family as well, joining QT Marshall. That is going to be great for them, because that's going to give them some spotlight going forward, and they're going to become definitely more well-known names than perhaps what they were in the Nightmare Family previously. And I think the Nightmare Family in general feels like it's got about 130 members in it. It feels that much, too many people in it. So for me, if I was to break up one group, that is the group that I would break up, because for me, even though they're all in different parts of the card, and you know, it's like they've got the Gun Club and other people like that that not really always seem associated with it, it just feels it's just thrown together for me. This sort of entourage thing for Cody, it doesn't quite connect, it doesn't quite work as well for me. So that would be one group I would break up if I was going to break up any. I like the fact that people have reason, you know, a purpose and reasoning for what they stand for, and I think that gives me more reason to believe in those groups. With the Inner Circle, with the Pinnacle, I get that. Death Triangle as well, Team Taz, even though that looks like Team Taz could be one that could be going to split very soon. Those sort of groups, you turn and say, I can see why they're put together, I see the purpose, and it makes sense going forward, and I can connect with it as a viewer, where with the Nightmare Family, I don't feel that feeling just as much. And it's the same with the tag teams as well. I'm just going to give a quick shout out why they're putting Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky together as a team. Scorpio Sky was a part of SCU not so long ago. Ethan Page is part of one and a half of the best tag teams in Impact Wrestling with Josh Alexander of the North. I know Josh is still in Impact and Ethan now is in pastures new in AEW, but still, the guy's just signed with the company. Give him a singles run. Don't just throw him in a tag team. There's got to be like 30, 40 tag teams in AEW, and it's so oversaturated. And don't get me wrong, they have the best tag team division, some of the best tag teams in the world, and they give them as good a platform as they can, but do they really need another tag team when these two guys should be focusing around that mid-card TNT Championship? Makes a lot more sense for me, and I think it's a waste of both of their talents right now, because yeah, they will probably be alright as a team. I understand the idea of strength in numbers, and that's what AEW sort of become about, that New Japan style of where if you're not in a faction, you don't seem to get ahead, but you can oversaturate it, you can make it feel like that it doesn't quite feel the same, where there's too much of it, and perhaps if they all represent the same thing, they all become the same, and then you become a disconnectors that way. So you need to have where all of them have a reason to connect to them, but also not too much of it, because otherwise it oversaturates that product. So yeah, I do agree, there's too many groups. Nightmare Family would be the first one I'd break up. Dylan Ketchum with our next question now. The Pinnacle versus Inner Circle at Blood and Guts. I think so. I think this is the destination where this is going to go. I know they wanted to do this before the pandemic with the Elite and Inner Circle, and of course then we couldn't have it anymore because of the fact the pandemic hit, and then Tony Khan said we weren't going to have this until fans were going to be fully back. But it's been over a year now. Some fans are in attendance. I think we are looking perhaps towards the future where hopefully we are going to get more and more people in attendance for shows. You can already see with WrestleMania next week that they're going to have 25,000 per night per show. So for me, that's a sign that things are starting to get more in the right direction. So I think with the Pinnacle in Inner Circle, I think that's the end game. I think that's where they're going. And even if we can't have it where it's a full packed house, I think the time is right to unleash it, because you can always do another one further down the line with fans. So I suggested on a video a couple of weeks ago, in fact it was on Ask SCW a couple of weeks ago, that will be the likely destination for these two factions, and I predicted it for Double or Nothing. It's a prediction for that pay-per-view because last year we had Stadium Stampede. I wouldn't be surprised to see it there. I'd like to see it dragged out to All Out, but I don't know what the booking direction is with AEW, but I do feel that will be the end game for this. Whenever that will be, Pinnacle Inner Circle, I do agree Blood and Guts is going to be brought out for the first time in AEW, regardless of what the situation is. So right now, my prediction, it will take place at Double or Nothing. Next question coming from Austin Whitley. Which was better, WrestleMania 20 or WrestleMania 21? Both are very good WrestleManias, and it's so difficult to answer this question really. Depending on which side of the fence you are, you could flip a coin. I'm sure many people will be saying a different answer to me at the screen right now. But look at it, WrestleMania 20, where it all begins again. It kind of was a WrestleMania where you're trying to build new stars, was the starting point with John Cena in the mid-card. You look towards the main event, Eddie Guerrero, of course, winning Kurt Angle, keeping the championship, and of course Chris Benoit winning the championship in the main event, which of course very special with him and Eddie at the time. Of course, at the end of that WrestleMania, that was probably one of the most iconic finishes to a WrestleMania ever. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I must admit I don't know how my stance would feel about that right now. But looking at WrestleMania 21, that also was building new stars for the future, but it felt at that point that some of those stars would go on to carry the company for a number of years. Of course, sadly, I mean, Eddie Guerrero was a great legend, but sadly wasn't with us a lot longer. Neither was Chris Benoit either, but of course, I mean, very different reasons. But you look at WrestleMania 21, with the first ever Money in the Bank ladder match, of course, that with Edge winning that, which then led to him becoming a world champion. John Cena, obviously becoming the mid-card champion in WrestleMania 20, but actually going on to become the champion, defeating JBL at WrestleMania 21. And then, of course, Batista and Triple H as well, which was an amazing storyline, which led to Batista winning the championship. And of course, you say some of those names, they went on to be main eventers for WWE for years and was carrying the brand, while you still had the likes of Undertaker, Randy Orton being on this show as well. So this, for me, I think I'm going to have to go for WrestleMania 21 because of the fact that when you look back at it, I look at that WrestleMania as where a lot of stars were built, main eventers were starting, and they went on to be big main events in the company for 5, 6, 7 years after that. So for me, I think I have to give WrestleMania 21 as my answer. Noob and Co. The next question is now here on Ask SCW. What are your thoughts on the Ring of Honor Women's Championship Tournament coming this summer? 5 WWE superstars should join the Hurt Business. I'm going to touch on that in a minute. And what are your thoughts on Andrade's interview? And do you think he's sabotaging Charlotte's career? 3 very interesting questions. Let's start off then with Ring of Honor, because I'm really excited to see that championship is coming back into play. I just feel for me that I really enjoyed Women of Honor. I loved the direction they had with the Women's Championship a few years ago, and I thought they were doing really good things. Obviously, Deonna Purrazzo was part of that roster at that one point. Kelly Klein was the champion. Sarumi Sakai, hope I've said that right, she was champion as well for a lengthy time. But it just feels like after that sort of super show they had with, I think it was New Japan and Ring of Honor in Madison Square Garden, I just feel, I don't know, I've lost track of really what was going on with that championship. It seemed that it became less focused, and of course Ring of Honor's had like a year off and had to, reevaluate some things that perhaps now they feel now's the time to let's hit the refresh button and let's go for it, because when they brought the championship in before, it felt like a very big deal, especially, I mean, Tenille Dashwood joined them at that point as well, so it'll be interesting to see how and what they're going to do going forward with it. But no, I'm certainly looking forward to it. I think it will be great to see, and I think it'll be an exciting tournament of the summer. Ring of Honor have got some great wrestlers in and amongst their roster, and I'm sure we may get 1 or 2 debuting women's wrestlers as well. They're great at picking up young independent talent that we're not perhaps used to seeing and making stars out of them. So Ring of Honor, definitely a place to keep an eye out for women's wrestling over this coming summer, I would say. As for 5 people joining the Hurt Business, well, if you saw my video this week, faction of the Hurt Business I would have liked to have seen would have been Ricochet and Samoa Joe a part of it. If Samoa Joe, who was missing a commentary this past week on Raw, was clear to return and MVP was in his seat, what if MVP knew all along that Samoa Joe was going to come in and help towards the end of the show? That would have been pretty darn awesome. But those two could be a shout. Keith Lee would be another one. Naomi, perhaps number 4. And let's think of a number 5 quickly off the top of my head. Let's go Mustafa Ali, because if you can't beat them, join them. That's what I would say there. You try to beat the Hurt Business, you try to get some retribution, but he can't seem to find it. He seemed to want to help Lashley last week on Raw, so yeah, he'll be my 5th choice. As for Andrade's interview, very interesting, wasn't it, with what happened there with Charlotte Flair? I wouldn't say he's sabotaging her career, definitely not. I think that according to what was said afterwards, from things he had said, some of it was lost in translation as well. When you do the direct translations from language to language, it doesn't always come out the same. I suppose, you know, if you've ever used Google Translate, that seems to happen quite regularly. So for me personally, I would turn and say he's definitely not sabotaging the career. He certainly gives some information away, stuff that we didn't know, and we have been speculating a lot what's been going on with Charlotte Flair as of recent. Obviously, with the pregnancy stuff that was going on, that turned out that she wasn't pregnant, but WWE thought that she was. That's an interesting story, and that seems to be why she's been kept off of WrestleMania. So, but she seems good to go now, apparently. So let's see if she's added in straight after WrestleMania, how it's going to be. It's going to be very interesting to see. But as for Andrade, I definitely don't think it's sabotage. I think he wants the best for her career, as he does for himself. I'm looking forward to seeing what both of them, what their futures hold, because obviously Charlotte will be back on WWE TV very soon. Andrade looks like he's teased, he's signed somewhere. I'm looking forward to seeing where that's going to be. Last question this week is coming from TNT. Who do you see Karrion Kross dropping the NXT World Heavyweight Championship to? His top 3 picks are Tommaso Ciampa, Walter, and Aleister Black. Well, I guess this is assuming he does win the championship, but of course that's my prediction. That's what I think is going to happen. Obviously, it must be your prediction as well. Of those names you mentioned, I'd love Aleister Black to be the one. I think that would be awesome to see him back in NXT and to actually have a match like that against Karrion Kross. I think it feels like a dream match. I'd really like to see it. As for people you can look elsewhere in the roster, I mean, I'm not quite sure who would actually defeat Karrion Kross. I don't think you can get these 205 guys to do so, but maybe Kross drops it in a triple threat match or a fatal 4-way. Certainly would be a way to protect him. I still feel at some point down the line we are going to get Kyle O'Reilly as the champion, so maybe he'll be the guy to do it. We'll have to wait and see, because Kyle O'Reilly is on a journey in NXT, and I do think it will lead him eventually becoming NXT champion. But that's all for me this week. Thank you so much for all your questions as always. Go and follow everybody on Twitter. Let's support each other in the wrestling community. Make sure to keep an eye on SCW as well. As I say, lots of videos have been dropping, some great videos this week and some great response from you guys as well. Thank you so much, all you guys and girls, for checking out the videos. And of course, more will be dropping this week. Videos dropping every single day, so make sure to go and check out. WrestleMania predictions will be dropping on Tuesday, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. There will be reviews of NXT TakeOver Stand and Deliver, as well as WrestleMania 37. And like I say, WrestleMania 9, the classic retro review, is available on the channel as of yesterday. Go and check it out now. A lot of hours went into that one, so I'd really appreciate it if you would go and check that one out. We're on the road to 1K as well, 30 subscribers away. Would love to hit the milestone, especially by WrestleMania. Now, of course, I cannot do it without your support, so thank you so much. So please spread the word at SCW. Let's see if we can get to 1K together. Thank you so much as always. I really do appreciate all the support that you guys and girls have been giving. But that's all for me. Thank you for watching. Take care. Have yourselves a good one. I'll see you next time here for Ask SCW here on YouTube.